an amendment. And without objection, all members will have 5 days to submit statements or extraneous materials on today's business. To insert statements into the record, please have your staff email the previously circulated address or contact full committee staff. As a reminder, please keep your video function on at all times, even when not recognized by the chair. Members are responsible for muting and unmuting themselves. And consistent with House rules, staff will only mute members as appropriate when they are not under recognition to eliminate background noise. I see we have a quorum, and we intend to consider 6 measures during this markup. But before I begin, I want to take a moment to express my sincere gratitude to my colleagues for entrusting me with this very awesome responsibility of chairing this committee. Serving as chair has been an enormous privilege, and working to strengthen U.S. leadership throughout the world and responding to some of the most complex international issues of our time has been an opportunity of a lifetime. And working with all of my colleagues, both sides of the aisles, Democrats as well as my Republican colleagues, and particularly working alongside Mike McCall. It has been an honor and a privilege, and I look forward to continuing to work together when we move forward in the next Congress. But it is, and I'll have additional remarks that I'd like to make before we conclude the markup and proceedings, but we'll be able to table them until the end so that we may consider 2 resolutions of inquiry that have been introduced and that are time sensitive in nature. So we'll do that now. So pursuant to notice for purposes of markup, I will begin by calling up H-Res 1456, and the clerk will report the resolution.
House Resolution 1456 of inquiry requesting the President.
Without objection, the first reading of the resolution is dispensed with, and without objection, the resolution shall be considered as read and open to amendment at any point. And at this time, I recognize myself to speak briefly on the measure. Today, we're marking up 2 resolutions of inquiry, ROIs, that unfortunately, like other ROIs introduced in this Congress, I believe they aim to score political points and dangerously politicize issues that should be well above the partisan fray. The first is H-Res 1546, requesting the President and directing the Secretary of State to transmit, respectively, certain documents to the House of Representatives related to the conclusion of the Department of State on whether Marc Fogel is wrongfully detained. So let's be clear. The department's review of possible wrongful detention criteria in Mr. Fogel's case is ongoing, as are efforts to ensure his fair, humane treatment and to secure his release on humanitarian grounds. A formal determination of wrongful detention is not required for these efforts to unfold. This committee takes extremely seriously its oversight of the State Department's work on behalf of Marc Fogel, as well as other Americans imprisoned overseas. And thankfully, this work has long been bipartisan, as we all want to see American citizens, like Mr. Fogel, reunited safely with their families. As such, the committee and the House have held more than a dozen engagements where Mr. Fogel's case has been specifically addressed. Likewise, the State Department continues to push Russian authorities for his release on humanitarian grounds. The State Department simultaneously is reviewing the facts of this case to determine whether he is wrongfully detained, as required by the Levinson Act. Just this week, the State Department provided committee staff another detailed briefing on Mr. Fogel's case, including an update of a recent prison visit to verify his well-being and details of state's ongoing efforts to secure his release on humanitarian grounds, work which continues notwithstanding any formal wrongful detention determination. But in pushing for more transparency on this case from the administration, we cannot lose sight of the bigger picture. We must take care not to politicize the issue or tip the U.S. government's negotiating hand by exposing sensitive internal deliberation of these cases. Putin, Xi, and other autocrats around the world would like nothing more than to see us divided over efforts to ensure the safety and well-being of our own citizens, and to be able to leverage sensitive details of individual cases and our internal deliberative processes. So while it may be well-intentioned, this ROI risks undermining the safety of Americans held abroad. It would likewise potentially undermine our ability to bring Marc Fogel and others home. Unfortunately, this ROI breaks from the bipartisan, bicameral work we have already undertaken to focus constructive attention on Mr. Fogel's case. And instead, it politicizes the issue, putting the internal, ongoing work on his case out into the open for a partisan fight. I have no doubt the criminal would love nothing more than to be able to exploit such a scenario. The Republican co-sponsors of this resolution have previously engaged in constructive, bipartisan oversight with the executive branch on Mr. Fogel's case, including with members of this committee, and I urge them to rejoin such efforts. For me, it's disappointing to see this serious issue become subject to partisan games. So with concern for Mr. Fogel's well-being, and with a laser-like focus on getting him and other Americans detained in Russia home, I oppose this ROI and will be calling a vote to report it adversely. I now turn to Ranking Member McCall for any statements he may have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And let me, in your previous remarks, say what an honor it's been to serve with you, you as chairman, and you've handled yourself very professionally with a good deal of sense of humor, which is required, I think, at times. And you've always been fair and bipartisan, and that's a tradition of this committee. And we intend to continue that. And it's, again, been a real honor working with you. So thank you for that. And now I'm going to have to be partisan. I like to be bipartisan, but this ROI requires the Secretary of State to turn over records concerning Marc Fogel, a 60-year-old American teacher who currently is detained in the IK2 labor camp north of Moscow. It's imperative that Congress receives these records, even if it is in a classified setting. Congress wrote the Levinson Act for the explicit purpose of providing assistance to U.S. citizens taken hostage by foreign governments. We laid out explicit criteria for the State Department to use when deciding whether Americans are being unlawfully or wrongfully detained. We owe Marc Fogel and his family a real determination. Not tomorrow or next week, but now. Marc Fogel was arrested by Russian authorities in August of 2021. Every case is different, and I understand that there's no statutorily mandated timeline, but almost a year and a half has gone by. We are all, Republicans and Democrats alike, outraged by Putin's use of Paul Whelan and Brittany Griner as political pawns in his game. The department made a relatively swift determination regarding their wrongful detentions. However, Marc and his family deserve answers. And I acknowledge that the department has not ignored this case and that Consular Affairs, SPEHA, and the European Bureau are having regular deliberations. But this ROI would allow Congress to better understand those deliberations in real time and gain access to the information that's being considered when weighing the Levinson Act factors. So with that, I support this ROI and I yield back the balance of my time.
Do any other members wish to speak on the measure? Hearing No further requests. Let's move on to amendments. Do any members wish to offer any amendments? Hearing none, we will now take a vote by voice. The question is to report H-Res 1456 adversely. To clarify, if you share my position to the resolution, you will vote aye. We're going to take a vote by voice. All members, please unmute your microphones. All those in favor say aye.
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 All opposed, no.
No?
No.
What are you doing?
In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table, and without objection, staff is authorized to make any technical and conforming changes. Next, we will consider H-Res 1482. Pursuant to notice, for purposes of markup, I now call up H-Res 1482, and the clerk will report the resolution.
House Resolution 1482 of inquiry requesting the President and directing the
Without
Secretary.
objection, the first reading of the resolution is dispensed with, and without objection, the resolution shall be considered as read and open to amendment at any point. And at this time, I recognize myself to speak briefly on the measure. Now, the second ROI is H-Res 1482, requesting the President and directing the Secretary of State to transmit, respectively, certain documents to the House of Representatives relating to congressional appropriated funds to the nation of Ukraine from January 20th, 2021 to November 15th, 2022. Now, I unfortunately cannot find any reasonable justification for the ROI introduced by Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene and other American alone extremists. The goal of this ROI could not be more transparent. It is to divide us politically and undermine strong bipartisan support for Americans' efforts supporting Ukrainian freedom and sovereignty. This measure plays straight, directly to Vladimir Putin's hands. That's exactly what he's been waiting for, exactly what he's been looking for. From day one, this committee and the entire Congress has remained resolutely bipartisan in our support for Ukraine as it fights against Russia's illegal invasion. It is this bipartisanship that has been pivotal to Ukraine's success, and it is helping them win. Acknowledging the unprecedented nature of the aid we are providing, the administration is fulfilling its duty to spend every U.S. taxpayer dollar in a transparent and accountable way, and to keep Congress informed at each and every step in the process. Since February, the administration has engaged with members and staff on no less than 50 occasions. Our brave diplomats working in a war zone in Kyiv have gone to painstaking lengths to track, monitor, and evaluate U.S. assistance. The administration, meanwhile, is cooperating fully and openly with an interagency task force of 3 inspector generals from state, DOD, and USAID to monitor, to track, and account for the totality of assistance provided to Ukraine. At every turn, the departments, agencies, and OIGs have kept this committee and the Congress more broadly and appropriately briefed and informed. In October, the administration further expanded and integrated ongoing monitoring and accountability efforts to ensure close tracking and transparency of all security assistance provided to Ukraine and additional support to neighboring states to bolster border security and counter political diversions or illicit transfers. Moreover, President Zelensky and the government of Ukraine, vocally grateful for the generosity of the American people, have taken care to doors and provide any insights that our government needs to ensure our aid is being spent the right way. Yet I regret that we have some voices, extremist voices in my opinion, like the sponsors of this ROI, echoing the propaganda of the Kremlin and are aiming to advance a narrative that supporting Ukraine is poor for the resources of the American people. They are trying, folks, to divide us. They tried to divide NATO, and they're trying to divide us in this Congress at a time and on an issue from which we cannot afford to pull back. The consequences for the people of Ukraine, for democracy, and for the security of Europe, the United States, are beyond and beyond are too dire. The consequences could be catastrophic. Looking forward to the 118th Congress, I urge my colleagues to ensure that our support to Ukraine remains resolute, bipartisan, and responsible. We've traveled collectively together to Poland, to areas that are close to the Ukraine border and to Ukraine. This is not the time for us to be divided. We've held together with NATO and the EU and other allies. Let's not fall into this trap. Let's stand together. Let's send one message out that we support in the United States House of Representatives, especially on this Committee of Foreign Affairs. We support Ukraine, and we're going to give them the resources that they need so they can win militarily and also humanitarian aid, because we see what Putin is doing to them right now, bombing their energy resources, holding them hostage in various other areas. Winter is upon them. This guy's committing war crimes. The only way he can win is divide us. Let's not let that happen. So I oppose the political, and it hasn't emanated from this committee, but I do see from others now, this is really a sideshow. That's what this ROI aims to create. So therefore, I will be also calling a vote to report it adversely. I now yield to Mr. McCall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, you and I have been probably some of the strongest supporters of the efforts in Ukraine to defeat the horrors of what Mr. Putin has done. And in fact, Ukraine's winning this fight. And we need to give them everything they need to win this. The Russian military has been very much decimated, and not one American soldier has died. I also support that this committee in Congress has the highest responsibility to conduct stringent oversight over the Department of State and USAID. Every single U.S. dollar counts, and the Biden administration should expect the Republican-controlled majority in the House next Congress to be vigilant in demanding transparency and accountability for U.S. assistance to Ukraine. The American taxpayer deserves this. So the era of writing blank checks, I think, is over, and you're going to see an era of transparency and accountability, because at the end of the day, the American people need to trust what we're doing. And where's the money going? And if we can demonstrate that it's actually going to help them win this effort, it makes our case stronger. This ROI, Resolution of Inquiry, requests the administration to transmit relevant documents related to congressionally appropriated funds for Ukraine. I support this resolution as a means to obtain critical information from the executive branch that will help Congress ensure that our support to Ukraine is being spent effectively and as intended by Congress. Importantly, this resolution requests information from the administration starting on January 20th, 2021, a full year before Russia's unprovoked war of aggression began. It will be critical for Congress to closely examine the administration's failure of deterrence leading up to February 24th so that it cannot be repeated in the future. And within days of being sworn in, President Biden agreed to a clean 5-year extension of the New START treaty, giving Putin exactly what he wanted. In May of 2021, the president waived congressionally mandated Nord Stream 2 sanctions, threatening the credibility of Western sanctions at a critical time in history. In August of 2021, Mr. Biden oversaw the disastrous withdrawal of U.S. troops from Afghanistan, damaging U.S. credibility with our partners and emboldening U.S. adversaries. In the months before the full-scale invasion, Mr. Biden failed to provide significant military support to Ukraine or impose any sanctions on the Putin regime, despite tens of thousands of Russian troops being seen in surveillance amassing on Ukraine's border. World War II made clear to us that appeasement invites aggression. Tyrants like Putin only respond to strength. Sadly, in the months ahead of February 24th, the Biden administration projected weakness. This administration has a lot to answer for, and the Republican-controlled majority in the House next Congress must ensure that we get those answers. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I end with my support for this measure, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Any other members wish to speak on this matter? Representative Susan Weil, Pennsylvania, you recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise to express my strong opposition to HRES 1482. I want to begin on a personal note. As a Jewish American, at a time when powerful public figures, including several celebrities with global platforms, are putting Jewish communities across our country at risk of violent attacks by engaging in vicious anti-Semitism and Holocaust denial, and when powerful politicians like former President Trump are cultivating these forces, and in the case of Minority Leader McCarthy and so many others, are failing to speak out unequivocally against that, it is beyond shameful to see support for a measure like this one introduced by Representative Green. I'm not going to attempt to recite even a fraction of the patently false, bigoted, and hateful statements and actions that have characterized Representative Green's time as a member of this body. I will just say that her anti-Semitic conspiracy theories and trivializations of Nazism stand out as particularly reprehensible reflections of her ideology and approach to holding public office. I cannot, in good conscience, remain silent about any of this. I find the idea of granting Rep. Green the legitimacy that comes with elevating one of her pieces of legislation to be profoundly offensive. It's antithetical to the purpose of this body and this committee. With that said, I want to move on to the substance of this resolution of inquiry, which takes aim at our strong support for the Ukrainians defending their country against Russia's full-scale, unjustified invasion. Time and again, members of this committee have held hearings and advanced legislation focused on the need for accountability and justice in the wake of the horrific war crimes that Russian forces are committing against civilians in order to attempt to break Ukrainian resistance and ultimately destroy Ukrainian society itself. This is what we should be focused on. Representative Green has, not coincidentally, consistently voted against providing any aid to Ukraine, and that's what this effort is truly about. The support that we have provided the Ukrainians has in fact come with unprecedented transparency, and we have seen its effectiveness proven in real time as the Ukrainians have built and strengthened their historic resistance month after month, pushing back the invading Russian forces despite the Russians' enormous advantages. As the representative of Pennsylvania's 7th District, which includes one of the country's largest Ukrainian American communities, I will never back down from providing the necessary support for Ukrainian forces to beat back this war of aggression and restore their territorial integrity. This resolution of inquiry is a political stunt designed to tie up and slow down our critical efforts to help Ukrainian forces. This change in policy would have the disastrous effect of signaling confusion and division to both our Ukrainian allies and our Russian adversaries at a time when Ukrainians have made decisive military gains. And that's without even commenting on what it would cause, the consternation that it would cause to our NATO allies. On behalf of my Ukrainian American constituents and their family members in Ukraine who are fighting for their country and their future, I urge my colleagues to join me in resoundingly opposing this resolution and reporting it adversely. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Who seeks recognition? Mr. Representative Burchett from Tennessee is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too have enjoyed your leadership in this committee. I appreciate you, brother. But I think one thing that we avoided in this committee for a long time, and that's personal attacks. And that I just witnessed a personal attack against one of our colleagues that I don't think is very appropriate. It's not becoming of this committee. A lot of issues were brought in to this, and the reality is all this is a vote about accountability, about transparency. What are we afraid of? What are we afraid of finding out? We have billions upon billions of dollars that are flowing to another country, and yet a couple of years ago we were told we couldn't invest $3 billion in our border because it would break us. Yet we've just given 40 plus billion. I guess we're at what, 60 billion now, something of that nature. And all this is just an accounting of American taxpayers' dollars. And we use that as an attempt to attack a young lady's credibility and her character. And to me, I find that unbecoming of this committee. And at the appropriate time, I would like to call for a roll call vote, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Now recognize Representative Jerry Connolly of Virginia, President of NATO Parliamentarian Authority.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And of course, at the appropriate time, I want to also add my remarks to those of our colleagues about your chairmanship. You've been fair and patient, unbelievably patient, and given everyone an opportunity, and you've added glory to the job, and I thank you. Thank you so much for your leadership and your friendship. You know, I heard Mr. Merchant, whom I like, Mr. Burchett, he said, look, this is a simple matter of accountability. I wish that were true. But we all know that's not true. We all know that behind this is something else. And at this moment, that risks serious undermining, serious erosion in confidence on the battlefield in Ukraine. The people of Ukraine have lost their electric power, their access to the internet, water, heat in a terrible winter. And those brave people are carrying on to fight an enemy that knows no bounds. And right now, the only signal we should be sending those people is our unswavering support. There'll be plenty of time to look at accountability and transparency. We should. But right now, we're in the middle of a war. Yesterday, I met with my counterpart from Ukraine. He's a member of the parliament. He's a brave young man. He goes out and fights and serves his country in the Rada in their parliament. He was here in Washington, meeting with people up here and with the administration. He told me that yesterday there was 70 missile strikes against Ukraine, 70. And that just one category of missiles, the Russians have 7,000 in their warehouses. That would mean another 100 consecutive days, theoretically, of 70 missile strikes a day. Can one imagine the cost of that in human lives, in human suffering? and the damage to infrastructure that is very difficult to repair. Because we're talking about old utility systems, many of which date back to the Soviet era. And they're trying to cope with all of that. And they need our support. They need our friendship. They need to know they can count on us. And while maybe we should have a discussion about accountability and transparency, I join that discussion. It's not now. We can't pretend that's all this is about. This is about reaffirming our support to the Ukrainian people and their struggle against authoritarianism, their struggle for the simple right to determine their own destiny, and they're sacrificing their lives for it. The least they can expect from us is that we will help them in that effort. We won't fight the fight for them, but we will make sure they have the resources they need to win that valiant fight. So, Mr. Chairman, I join you in opposing this seemingly simple ROI that is anything but, because of the context and because of the message I believe it would send to the Ukrainian people. I would also add, Mr. Chairman, because you mentioned wearing my other hat as the president of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, the legislative arm of NATO. We need to be cognizant of the message we send our allies. In recent years, they have reason to believe maybe we're not that reliant. And we don't want to send any mixed message on this subject. We want to make sure that that alliance is strong, it's cohesive, and it's unified. And that we're showing nothing but solidarity at this precarious moment. It's particularly important since the Ukrainians are actually winning on the battlefield. So I'm all for transparency and accountability, but not in this resolution, not now, not with this message. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back, and I recognize Representative Brian Mast of Florida for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just heard a couple of very interesting arguments. I want to make sure that I'm clear on those arguments. Mr. Connolly, you're happy to rebut. Oversight's important, billions of dollars being spent. Just don't do oversight on it now. Am I understanding that argument correctly?
Well, not in the context that follows, I don't want to support any more aid to Ukraine.
I think I quoted you, though. Oversight's important, just not now.
In that context.
So this can't be the direction of Congress. That argument is shoot first, ask questions later. Shoot first with the American taxpayer, billions of dollars, ask questions later. It's very akin to what happened in Afghanistan with the withdrawal. Think about withdrawing from Afghanistan. Don't plan or ask any questions about pulling out billions of dollars of equipment and in turn create the most well-equipped terrorist organization in the history of the world. That's what happens when you shoot first and ask questions later. Our job is oversight. And the other argument that was made here about this bill was, I don't like Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, so don't advance this piece of legislation about oversight. I don't like her for these reasons, personal attacks. I don't mind personal attacks. I think we're all individuals, and I don't mind getting in people's business, and I don't mind people getting in my business. You know, that's the nature. Our personalities have to do with how we vote and how we think on things, so I actually appreciate that part of it, but that's the argument being made. I don't like Marjorie Taylor Greene, so don't move the legislation that she has to ask for the documents, it says it specifically right here, related to the appropriations that Congress has sent to the executive branch. I can't think of any reason, personally, why we as Congress that sent the executive branch dollars, some of us voted on it, some of us didn't, but we are responsible for the taxpayers' dollars, would not want that oversight right now. There is stuff behind this, 100%, Mr. Connolly. You said that you know what's behind this. What's behind this? Be perfectly transparent for me. I don't trust the administration. That's behind this. I don't trust what they've done with dollars in various agencies. That's what's behind this. I don't trust their tactics, their planning, their strategy. That's what's behind this. And I absolutely want to see right now, before any more money is spent on this, what is going on there? What is their train of thought? How have they planned things out or not planned things out? Because they don't have a good history of demonstrating that they do plan things out appropriately. Not to entirely rehash Afghanistan, which is what I just went over. But if you want to have further dialogue on this, I'm happy to. You're looking at me like you got a few more comments.
So, yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Would you suspend any arms shipments or payments to the Ukrainians during this audit that this so-called simple ROI would entail?
It's not the request of this particular piece of legislation to suspend anything. It is that within 14 days of the passage of this, that these documents related to any appropriations by the House of Representatives to the executive branch be sent over here so that we can review this and do our oversight.
No, but
Doing
you-
our oversight should absolutely, in answer to your question, and I'll certainly leave you time to respond. I like the dialogue. Doing oversight should absolutely have bearing on what we do forward. If we do oversight
So
and
it
we
would-
come up with, damn, something really wrong is going on here, then it's responsible for us to respond to that accurately to the American people.
I would just say it's a little confusing understanding your argument, Mr. Mass, because on the one hand, you say, I don't trust the administration, and that's why we need this. I don't trust them about anything. I don't trust them in Afghanistan. I don't trust them in Ukraine, and I want to see everything. And the implication is, before we proceed with any more aid, in the middle of a war, I think that's a dubious proposition, and I simply wanted to ask you, would you hold up aid
Potentially.
as part of this?
Yes.
Potentially.
Potentially.
Okay.
Again, this is the nature of oversight. If what comes back and us doing oversight says, man, the administration is really screwing this up, not paying attention to this, no tactics, no strategy, this, yeah, that should have bearing on what Congress does with appropriations. That is the nature of oversight and reviewing documents.
Mr. Mass,
My time is up.
Gentleman's time has
that's
expired.
not the nature of oversight in the middle of a war.
Gentleman's time has expired. I now recognize Representative David Cicilline, Rhode Island, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in strong opposition to this resolution of inquiry. I think one of the things we have learned in our very close monitoring of the war in Ukraine is the importance of a unified approach, both that is led by the United States with our allies in the region, but an understanding that Vladimir Putin is engaged in a brutal, vicious, unwarranted, illegal attack on the Ukrainian people. And many of us have traveled to the region and seen the fight. The men and women of this country are fighting and dying to defend their democracy, to defend their right to decide their own future, to defeat a brutal dictator, authoritarian figure, Vladimir Putin, a war criminal who thinks he can redraw the lines of a country by force. And they've had the courage to organize neighborhood groups armed for the first time to fight and die for their own country and to face brutal conditions as he attempts to level this country. We've seen unspeakable destruction. And the only thing that the United States has done is led a coalition to stand with the Ukrainian people as they engage in this fight. This is a dangerous moment. And the unity of the Congress of the United States, the unity of the freedom-loving, democracy-loving world has been critical in this fight. And we cannot do anything to undermine the very strong message that we stand committed to remain with the Ukrainian people until they win this fight. China is watching. Dictators and authoritarian leaders all over the world are watching how we behave in this moment. And we should also recognize that the author of this legislation is the same person who at a rally on November 4th of this year said, not if the GOP, the Republican Party, takes over, not one more penny will go to Ukraine in their fight for freedom and democracy. So context matters. This is not just about, oh, geez, we've got to be better bookkeepers and do some oversight. Of course, we're all responsible. We all take an oath to honor that oath by making sure we do our jobs and provide appropriate oversight for every dollar that's spent. That's not what this is about. This is an effort to undermine America's support for Ukraine, to begin a process to make sure the words of the very author, that not one more penny go to the people of Ukraine in this fight. That's a terrible message. You can, play some political stunts with resolutions of inquiry at different times without lots of consequences. This has a consequence. The world is watching our ability to remain vigilant in our fight and our support to support the Ukrainian people in their fight for freedom and democracy. They're literally losing their lives, facing some of the most treacherous conditions to stand up for democracy, which is under assault all over the world. We're in a democratic recession. We had our own challenges here in America. And so in this moment, those of us who care about democracy have a responsibility to make sure we're doing everything we can to make sure they prevail. Because they're not just fighting for their own futures. They're fighting for the peace and security of Europe and the peace and security of the world. And when history records this moment, I hope we will all remain committed to this fight, stand with the Ukrainian people, and reject this resolution authored by someone who says not one more penny should go to the Ukrainian people. That alone deserves a no vote on this resolution. I urge my colleagues to follow the chairman's recommendation, and I yield back.
Now recognize Representative Scott Perry of Pennsylvania for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not going to take the 5 minutes as a gift to you for your service on this committee. You've been a friend. You've been fair. We've had some disagreements, but I've appreciated your leadership here, and I think it's worth acknowledging. I wasn't going to say anything, but as you know, Mr. Connolly invokes the best in all of us on this committee. And let me just say this: it's quite honestly, it's pretty rich to say we can't do it in the middle of a war. Can't take a look in the middle of a war, and I'll remind everybody that it was Mr. Connolly's party that actually defunded troops in contact, troops on the front line in the 70s, and left and abandoned them there. And let me also just say that while our country has an invasion going on at our southern border, we're willing to, travel 4,000 or 5,000 miles with our tax dollars in the middle of raging inflation when the people that I represent can't pay their bills, choosing between fuel for their vehicle and groceries, that we've got to spend this money overseas. And look, there's not a person on this committee, there's probably not a person in this room that agrees with Vladimir Putin, Russia, what they've done. We all want to help. We all find it reprehensible. But to say that we have to wait till the war is over, and I'm a little sad that my friend Jerry from Virginia has left, I would ask him, how long should we wait? I don't know, maybe it's going to be 20 years. I don't know what it's going to be. I don't know who knows what it's going to be. But I know the folks that I represent right now working hard every day to pay their taxes and feed their children and pay their mortgages and their car payments. And what they're worried about is being able to pay the bills. And that's the fact that the IRS says that if they don't report every single thing that they bought on Etsy or something like that, that they're going to be facing an audit. Meanwhile, their southern border is wide open, and their tax dollars are going 4,000 or 5,000 miles away, and we're supposed to turn our head away and not ask one question. Regardless of the maker of the bill's motivation, it's our job to ask questions. That's what we're doing here. And with all due respect, when myself, Mr. Green, Mr. Mast, when we were overseas, I know there was accountability asked for the fights that we were in while we were in the fights. With that, Mr. Chairman, it's been a pleasure to serve on the
Yield 1 second.
Of course, Mr. Chairman.
Let me just say this. I think we have. I don't agree with the statement that we have not, on this committee, been utilizing oversight. As I said, we've had over 50 occasions where we had people from the administration here. And we've talked about, and we've had them, whether you're talking about, particularly state, USAID, we've asked them, we've tried to monitor and track and account for the totality of the money that's been provided to the Ukraine. I mean, that's what we've been trying to do. That's what we've been doing. and I've also heard from both sides, is give the Ukrainians what they need because they're winning. We're not questioning, I don't think anybody's questioning whether or not they're winning or not, whether or not the strategy is working or not, whether or not our allies are together with us or not. At least I don't think I've heard that somewhat maybe from the author of this ROI, but I don't think I heard that from anybody from this committee. They all say we're winning. Some say we need to give them more than what we're giving them so that they can win. But we've been doing this oversight. It's not like we've had our eyes closed and saying nothing else is happening. We're doing that. We just want them to win.
Mr. Chairman, I hope they win too. I hope they do it soon. But I don't think asking asking our own government for an accounting of our citizens' tax money in regard to the support of Ukraine is too much to ask. And with all due respect, while I know that we've been doing some oversight here, I think it falls far short of what it needs to be in this instance. My constituents are frustrated. They want them to win too. They don't agree with what Russia's doing, but they want an accounting for the money that they're sending to the Ukrainian border and they want to know why it's more important than the money that's not being sent to our border. With that, I'll yield.
Gentleman yields back. And I now recognize Representative Tom Malinowski of New Jersey for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe in oversight in the middle of a war. I agree with Mr. Mast on that question. I do want to address a phrase that I heard used today. I've heard it used by Leader McCarthy. And a few moments ago, I heard it used by our ranking member, somebody who I consider a great friend for whom I have tremendous respect. But I do have concern with this phrase, and the phrase is blank check. Blank check means we're giving Ukraine billions of dollars and they can go use it for whatever they want. We don't ask any questions. And I think all of us know here that's not the case. First of all, they are paying for that support with blood. They're not taking the money and spending it in the Caribbean, buying property in the UAE, doing all kinds of crazy, nefarious things. They are taking that money to train and equip young men and women who every single day on the front line are risking their lives and giving their lives for the cause of freedom. That's what they're doing. It's not a blank check. Does not come without conditions. It comes with an expectation that these good people are going to do vastly more than any of us is being expected to do in this situation, and that is to risk and to give their lives for freedom. And we know that that's what they're doing, because as the chairman suggested, we do have plenty of oversight. Every single one of us here has been to numerous briefings at which we've been able to question the administration at length as to what they are doing. Many of us have traveled to Ukraine, and we all have the opportunity to do more of that, and I hope members on both sides will avail of themselves of that opportunity. Sit in our embassy, sit with our USAID personnel, sit with our DoD personnel that are conducting oversight, that are tracking every single weapon, every single piece of ammunition that's going to the front line. A lot of us are in touch with Ukraine's own anti-corruption campaigners. These are amazing people, because this is a problem in that country over the years. As we all know, the United States helped to train a lot of Ukraine's anti-corruption organizations. Are they asking for this? No, they're not. But they are certainly tracking every single penny that we are giving to their government. And knowing these folks, if anybody in the Ukrainian government was misspending the funding that we are providing at a time when the life of every single Ukrainian is on the line, they would want to hang those officials by a lamppost. They are our eyes and ears as well in this effort. So let's continue to do oversight. And if you think that we need to do this as well, that's fine. But let me tell you what this would actually mean. Very, very little, other than asking probably dozens and dozens and dozens of people at the State Department, USAID, and DOD to spend the next 2 weeks not helping Ukraine, not actually conducting the mission that we want them to conduct, but searching through their emails, searching through their documents to come up with an answer to a question that we already know the answer to. Documents that probably no one sitting here today, certainly none of the members, were actually going to read, because we already know the answers to these questions. So if you want to do that, okay, that's fine. But please, I beg you, do not use this phrase blank check, because what that communicates to the American people is that there's something wrong here. It communicates to the American people that we are just giving Ukraine all this money and they're spending it on things that God knows what they're spending it on. We don't know. And we know that that's not true. And I know, Mr. McCall, you of all people do not want to do anything that diminishes public support for what we are doing in Ukraine. In fact, I've heard you many times challenge the administration to loosen some of the restrictions they placed on this aid, to provide more weapons that are not currently being provided, which suggests you agree with me that it's not a blank check. And so, please, let's have oversight. Let's have the right type of oversight. Let's not use language that diminishes public support for this effort. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I now recognize Representative Mark Green of Tennessee for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I too thank you for your leadership. And
Hey, so
it's been enjoyable getting to work with you. Could we?
Well, somebody, Mike, needs to mute their mic.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Look, a lot of this argument that we're hearing today against this is about the horror of war and how you can't have an accounting in the midst of the horror of war. Well, as I think about that, there are only a few people on this committee that actually have seen the horror of war. One of them is two people down from me. I know myself, I've made 3 trips to combat. Every time we had to account for every single piece of ammunition, every single piece of equipment, and if something got lost, people were held accountable. You do that in combat. Trust me, you do. And there's no reason why having an accounting, having transparency reported to Congress who writes the check is a bad thing. It doesn't slow down one piece of weapon going to Ukraine. And to say that it does is a fallacy. It's deception. It's dishonesty. The horror of war, yeah, I've seen it. And I still had to make sure that my night vision goggles, my weapon, were all turned in at the end of the mission. Accountability and actually giving stuff to our friends to fight their war are two completely different things. You can have them both at the same time. Absurd to suggest otherwise. One of the other reasons that has been voiced about not supporting this is because comments that were made by the author of this, and I'm not even going to get into those, but I will tell you that everybody who has said those things today as reasons not to support it certainly supported legislation in this committee made by Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, and she made anti-Semitic comments, horrible comments. And yet, I bet you we can pull up the voting record on her legislation, and y'all voted for it. So your arguments make no sense. I'm sorry. The horror of war, you still account for stuff, and you're certainly inconsistent if you're applying the what she said test. I yield.
Gentleman yields back. Is there any other further requests?
yes, Mr. Chairman. Chris Smith.
Mr. Smith, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
And I want to join my colleagues in thanking you for your leadership. It has been tremendous. You've been fair throughout your tenure as chairman. And I was so happy to work with you on so many issues over these many years. So I just want to single that out and say how grateful I am. And I know Mike McCall said for all of us how we feel about you. So thank you. I do want to say I do support, and I support it strongly, and that is Ukrainian aid, both humanitarian as well as military. But as Mr. Green just said, and others have said, accountability and transparency is extraordinarily important as well. And if we need to get information on a more secretive basis, do it. But we don't get everything, I believe, in terms of these packages that we need to know. And I'll give an example. We all remember in 2014 when President Poroshenko asked the Obama administration for military assistance, which he did not get. And he said in the speech before the joint session of Congress, one cannot win the war with blankets. So we have that past that we think of where they did not get what they needed. So when Wendy Sherman testified before the committee in March of 2022, I asked her, because there were reports in Politico and elsewhere, that Zelensky had asked for help, military aid packages. This is before any of the hostilities started. And key items under consideration for the packages, including short-range air defense missiles, systems, small arms, and anti-tank weapons. I asked Secretary Sherman, can you tell the committee what Ukrainian President Zelensky asked for over the past year, including air defense systems, that he didn't get? Still haven't gotten that answer. So, past can be prologue. We're not sure if he is asking for, he being Zelensky, is being honored in the sense that it's seen as needed. I support aid to help our friends in Ukraine. I'm the one who introduced the resolution and actually chaired a hearing saying that we can charge Putin with war crimes right now. Don't go to the Security Council, go to the General Assembly, and I actually had a hearing with Tom Lantos' commission and introduced the resolution here in the House of Representatives, calling for that kind of hybrid court to go after him and to do it now. Wait till all the bloodshed has been spilled, but do it now. And we still have not gotten anything. I asked our secretary that question as well. We could get a majority vote in the General Assembly of the United Nations, and we could get it almost immediately if we fought for it and tried to get it. But again, I think we need to know what's going on in terms of specifics. And again, past can be prologue. I still don't know what did Zelensky ask for that he didn't get, that might have mitigated the attack, might have been the deterrence needed to tell Putin, you're going to lose soldiers and you're going to lose tanks, because Zelensky had the capability to deter the aggression. So, no. So I think this is a good idea. I don't think, if anything, it might even mean more aid will be provided as we find out what has been asked for and what has not been provided. And I thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield.
Gentleman yields back. I now recognize Representative Andy Barr of Kentucky for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the chairman's leadership on Ukraine. I appreciate the chairman and the ranking member's show of unity on Ukraine. And I agree with the chairman and the ranking member that we do need to show unity as a country in defense of the Ukrainian resistance. But that's precisely why I supported Ukrainian assistance and why I stand in support of this resolution of inquiry. And I think there's no reason why we need to be disunified or not unified when it comes to accountability, transparency, and making sure that our assistance is actually working. I would argue that, and I concur with the comments of many of my colleagues, and many of the arguments have already been made, so I won't belabor the points. But I think one point that has not been made is that we want to make sure that the strategy is working. If you truly support the Ukrainian resistance, if you truly want to defeat the Russian aggression, then why on earth would we not want a full accounting of how our assistance is actually being delivered, how it's being used? As my colleague, Mr. Smith, just pointed out, whether or not this administration's resistance to deliver some of the weapon systems that have been specifically requested, whether or not that is having a bearing on the effectiveness of the Ukrainian resistance. So I would argue, number one, to rebut Mr. Connolly's argument, it's not now, the time is not now to conduct this oversight. It is always time to conduct oversight to make sure that our strategy is actually working. Isn't that what we want? Isn't that what we want? We want the Ukrainians to succeed in repelling the Russian aggression and the Russian invasion. If we don't have transparency, the American taxpayers don't know whether or not their generosity is actually being delivered in a way that is delivering victory, then we're not doing our job. And I would just share this one anecdote. I met a young man, a Ukrainian soldier, who returned from the battlefield in the Battle of Mariupol without a leg. He woke up in a coma in a Russian prison. He was released in a prisoner exchange, 7 Russian soldiers for him, and his name was Vladimir. And I told him about my constituents, the taxpayers who had sent me to Washington to vote on these issues of Ukrainian assistance. And I say this as someone who voted for $40 billion in assistance to Ukraine. And I told this young, brave, courageous freedom fighter that some American taxpayers don't understand what this is about. And I asked him to tell me what he wanted me to tell my constituents about what this was all about. And he said, first of all, say thank you to the American people for delivering this assistance. But secondly, tell them that this is not just about Ukraine. This is about humanity and civilization. And that inspires me. And I want to make sure that we're actually supporting the cause that Vladimir fought for in an effective way. And to do that, we need accountability. We need information from this administration that the assistance that the American taxpayer is delivering is working. And so I'll just conclude by saying, I do not believe this measure will diminish public support. I think this measure is required for continued American taxpayer support. So with that, I urge my colleagues to support the resolution. No, it's not about a blank check. If you don't have an accounting, the American taxpayers can think nothing other than this is a blank check. We need to restore confidence in American taxpayers in order to continue the vital assistance that's needed here. And let me just say one other thing, and that is that where is this administration on closing the loophole and sanctions? Where is this administration on fighting Russia in an effective way? By unleashing American energy. You want to crush Russia? Then we need a reversal of this administration's war against American energy. That's what we need to do. Don't give me this nonsense that we need unity. You want unity? You want to crush the Russian aggressors? Unleash American energy dominance again. That's how we win this war. That's how we help Ukrainians. That's how we unite our country in support of the Ukrainian people. And I'll yield to my friend from Tennessee.
Just a quick question. What if the transparency found an efficiency that got the weapon systems there faster? Wouldn't that be great?
Gentleman's time has expired. I now recognize Representative Pfluger from Texas for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and echo the comments from my colleagues about your leadership and the fairness in which you've orchestrated pretty much our hearings throughout this time. Let me just start by saying my good friend from Kentucky, Mr. Barr, makes a great point. It is time to put Midland over Moscow, by the way. We've been saying that for several years. You know, the quote that I heard that really bothers me the most is, not at this time, not right now. Well, I couldn't think of something more disrespectful to my 750,000 constituents, hardworking men and women. That's $121 per person in this country if we just go with the $40 billion. For a family of 4, that's $484. That's a check that we've just written. As someone who actually served in combat along with these others that have mentioned it, you know, I'd like to know the effectiveness of something that I supported. We're not asking the Ukrainian government to do anything that's going to hamper this effort. Nothing to slow them down. We're asking the U.S. government to show us the receipts. We're asking the United States government to tell us where the money went. And with all due respect, the gentlelady from Georgia, Ms. Green, has every right to know where $90 million, her district share, went. And it's a good question. And we need to figure that out. And so for us in this committee to say that other people don't have a say, don't have a right to ask, not at this time, not right now, that is extremely disrespectful. All 435 of us have the right to raise our hand on any given day without persecution. And I've heard it in this committee time and time again that we should respect each other. This is disrespectful to the gentlelady from Georgia. Regardless of where she stands on this issue, how she voted, she has the right to know where $90 million, her district share, 750,000 people, of the $40 billion that was voted on. And I'd associate myself with the comments of everyone else on this side of the aisle who has said that we want to know how the money is being used, what weapon systems are needed, and how we can continue to see successful gains for the Ukrainian people. I would challenge, and yes, I will yield in just a second. I would challenge anyone on this committee who has talked to the warfighters, the Ukrainian warfighters who have come to my office and have asked for specific things. I represent my district like everyone else on this committee, and my district wants to know now, at this time, where the money has gone, and I'd gladly yield to you.
I thank my friend. I hope my friends on the other side of the aisle can understand why we might be a little skeptical on this side of the aisle, given the author of this resolution who said on November 4th, if the Republicans win the majority in the election, quote, not another penny will go to Ukraine, unquote. That would suggest that the sincerity behind this resolution isn't there, that what really is the agenda here is to cut off all aid to Ukraine. And that's why this member believes this is the wrong time to do that, because that's the message it sends. I thank my friend for yielding.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that most of us would probably have to say that because she was kicked off her committees and doesn't have a chance to actually ask these questions, which is a whole other issue, that we shouldn't judge the sincerity level based on what I have just read and reread for 2 or 3 times is a very simple question. And with that, I yield back.
Mr. Fogel, let me just say to all the members that, I'm just puzzled, members at any time can view in our classified spaces packets upon packets of documents with details upon details of weapons, arms, ammunition provided by the United States. They have been provided on an ongoing basis by the dozens and for months, and have been and are still available to members for review at any time, and of course, how that money is being spent. Certain specifics are not public, but many details that members are discussing and asking questions about are all covered materials already provided by the administration and have been and still are available for review. The gentlelady who is the author of this is not on this committee, but it's available to us on this committee.
Will the chairman yield? Yes. Then it should be very easy to compile this data and put it together exactly in the format being asked for.
You have it. It's there. Go get it. Does anybody else wish to be recognized? You're not? All right, no. Hearing no other, are there any amendments? Hearing none, we'll now take a vote by voice. We'll make sure. The question is to report HRES 1482 adversely. To clarify, if you share my opposition to the resolution, you will vote aye. We're going to take a vote by voice. All members, please unmute your microphones. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Aye. Aye.
All opposed, no.
No. No.
No.
In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and without objection, a recorded vote is ordered. The question is now to report HRES 1482 adversely. As a reminder again, if you share my opposition to this measure, you should vote aye. All members, turn on your video The clerk will please call the roll.
Hey guys, how's it going?
I don't see Representative Sherman. I don't see Representative Sears.
Hey
Representative
Fred, how's it
Connolly.
going? How are you?
Aye.
Representative Connolly votes aye.
How's
I
everything?
don't see Representative Bass. Representative Keating.
Aye.
Representative Keating votes aye. Representative Cicilline.
Aye.
Representative Cicilline votes aye. Representative Barra. Representative Barra.
Aye.
Representative Barra votes aye. Representative Castro.
Aye.
Representative Castro votes aye. Representative Titus.
Aye.
Representative Titus votes aye. Representative Liu.
Aye.
Representative Liu votes aye. Representative Wild.
Aye.
Representative Wild votes aye. Representative Phillips. I don't see Representative Phillips. Representative Omar. Representative
Aye.
Omar. Representative Omar votes aye. Representative Allred.
Aye.
Representative Allred votes aye. I don't see Representative Levin.
I'm here. Can you see me?
Representative Levin, how do you vote, sir?
Aye.
Representative Levin votes aye. Representative Spanberger.
Aye.
Representative Spanberger votes aye. Representative Houlihan.
Aye.
Representative Houlihan votes aye. Representative Malinowski.
Aye.
Representative Malinowski votes aye. Representative Andy Kim.
Aye.
Representative Andy Kim votes aye. Representative Jacobs.
Aye.
Representative Jacobs votes aye. Representative Manning. Aye.
Aye.
Representative Manning votes aye. Representative Sherfilis McCormick.
Aye.
Representative Sherfilis McCormick votes aye. Representative Costa.
Costa votes aye.
Representative Costa votes aye. Representative Vargas.
Aye.
Representative Vargas votes aye. Representative Gonzalez.
Gonzalez votes aye.
Representative Gonzalez votes aye. Representative Schneider.
Aye.
Representative Schneider votes aye. Ranking Member McCall.
No.
Ranking Member McCall votes no. Representative Smith.
No.
Representative Smith votes no. Representative Shabbat.
No.
Representative Shabbat votes no. Representative Wilson. Representative Wilson votes no. Representative Perry. Representative Perry votes no. Representative Issa.
No.
Representative Issa votes no. I don't see Representative Kinzinger. Representative Zeldin.
No.
Representative Zeldin votes no. Representative Wagner.
No.
Representative Wagner votes no. Representative Mast. Representative Mast votes no. Representative Fitzpatrick.
Fitzpatrick votes no.
Representative Fitzpatrick votes no. I don't see Representative Buck. Representative Burchett.
Burchett votes no.
Representative Burchett votes no. Representative Green.
No.
Representative Green votes no. Representative Barr.
Nope.
Representative Barr votes no. I don't see Representative Stubbe. Representative Muser.
No.
Representative Muser votes no. Representative Tenney.
No.
Representative Tenney votes no. Representative Pfluger.
No.
Representative Pfluger votes
This is
no.
fine.
Representative Maliatakis.
No.
Representative Maliatakis votes no. I don't see Representative Meyer. Representative Jackson.
Representative Jackson votes no.
Representative Jackson votes no. Representative Young Kim.
You're voting aye and then aye. No.
Representative Young Kim votes no. Representative Salazar.
Votes no.
Representative Salazar votes no. Mr. Chairman?
Representative Bass?
Representative Bass, I do not have a vote for you, ma'am. How would you like to vote?
Bass votes aye.
Representative Bass votes aye.
Representative Phillips votes aye as well.
Representative Phillips votes aye.
Sherman votes
Representative Meyer?
I think I heard Representative Sherman. How do you vote, sir?
I vote aye.
Representative Sherman votes aye. I think I also heard Representative Meyer. How do you vote, sir?
Representative Meyer votes no.
Representative Meyer votes no. Mr. Chairman?
Aye.
Chairman votes aye.
Mr. Chairman, how am I recorded?
Who's that?
This Congressman Buck.
Representative Buck, I do not have a vote for you, sir.
I vote no.
Representative Buck votes no.
Any other members wishing to vote?
Was he hostile? Was he
Any members wishing to change their vote? Clerk to report the vote.
Mr. Chairman, on that vote, there were 26 ayes and 22 noes.
The ayes have it, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. The measure is reported to the House adversely. Without objection, staff is authorized to make any technical and conforming changes.
Mr. Chairman, pursuant to House rules, I request that members have the opportunity to submit views for any committee report that may be produced on any of today's measures.
Without objection.
Thank you.
At this time, the committee is going to recess. We will reconvene the markup tomorrow afternoon. We will update everyone on timing. The committee is now in recess and subject to the call of the chair. See you tomorrow.